So another Patreon Q&A. Thank you again, Patreon, so much for your support and for your questions. Also today we have many questions. There are timestamp links in the description so you can skip around. And I also created a document with the different questions from previous Q&As with timestamp links already baked in, so it's easier just to find things from previous Q&As. I believe there's lots of good information out there in these videos. I want to quickly thank also PathSet for donating his collections for the giveaways. There are monthly giveaways on the Patreon Discord channel with challenges and again prizes and all sorts of different cool things. And there's also a lovely community on this Discord channel. So if you're a Patreon, come join us on Discord. If you are not a Patreon, come join us on Patreon. We have a lovely community. There are monthly challenges, all sorts of different extra content. Yes, so come join us. It will be great to have you there. Let's start with the first question. So the first question is actually from a previous Q&A that I said I will come back to. This is from Bruno Proti. Vox processing, basically speaking about a track. Of course, there will be a link to this track in the description where there is a light but very interesting vocal processing. So I tried sort of recreate it. I couldn't really get the result I wanted because I think the equipment he's using is... I don't know, it has sort of magic to it. I'm not so sure what he's using there. I added a sort of a comp filter, or I tried also with different modules. It didn't really work out. Listen to this track, it's quite interesting. If you think you have a better idea how to recreate this in VCVRack, or just how to recreate it in general, let me know in the comments, of course. The patch, of course, also will be available on Patreon. So Patreons, if you want to download it and try it yourself, feel free. So let's first of all go through the background music. Let's say there is a kick drum coming from tremor. There is a hi-hat on the offbeat coming from noise through a bandpass filter. It's on the offbeat because I'm triggering it with a delayed clock. I have the delay here delayed by 1/8. Right? So it will be on the offbeat. Then there is the first layer of the bass, sequenced by the phrase sequencer. This is sequencing kick all. There is also an envelope on the shape just to make this a bit more punchy. And another sub bass. Oh yeah, coming from an LFO side chained to the kick drum. The LFO is basically the sub bass sub oscillator. Right, and then there is some noise, another noise. I could just use this noise module. I don't know why I added another one, but there is another noise through a bandpass filter with some modulation. Right, just as another layer. So now the vocals. So a quick disclaimer, I'm no singer. My vocal capabilities are quite bad, so don't judge me on the singing itself. I also believe that the voice of the guy who sang the track is much more grainy than mine, so I think the result also because of this is quite different. But this will be with let's reset.
Through it all, the conversations.
I honestly apologize for this.
I was never good at conversation.
Right, so this is basically how it goes.
I'm through it all, the conversation.
Right, so first of all, what I heard there is a sort of I believe it's a sort of a comp filter.
Any more conversation.
Some sort of a delay-based effect. So I did rescomb.
I'm through it all, the conversations.
Right, let's listen to it again.
I was never good at conversation.
And there is also a random panning going on. So it will randomly with sample and hold.
Through it all, the conversations.
Go left and right. Again, randomly it will
So don't expect any more conversation.
And again, it's not quite there. I think the rescomb is not quite enough for this. But let's continue to the glitch, and then I will try this with other modules as well. So what I'm doing here, I'm sending this to a VCA. In this case, it's a stereo strip. Let me just mute this for a second. The stereo strip from Befaco. Right, and here there is an envelope, a random envelope coming from the chances module, or being triggered by the chances module, opening this VCA, which is sending this into a delay and reverb, my usual setup for glitch, chronoblob 2 and plateau. Chronoblob 2 is being frozen, right? So it's looping, and plateau is adding some reverb, and then the reverb is cut out, so it will sound like this.
I'm through it all, the conversations.
Right, and this will happen again randomly.
So don't expect any more conversation.
It's maybe a bit too much. Maybe the reverb is a bit too much. Maybe I can take it down.
All the conversations.
Right, maybe a bit less low frequencies.
I was never good at conversation.
I'm also sending all of these vocal chains, all of the vocal chains through a group, through compression and EQ, right? Just to EQ everything a bit,
So
and
don't expect any more conversation.
just very light compression. Now, so this is with Rescomb. Let's listen to this now with the Cumbulator from Surge XT. It's still in beta, but it works quite nicely. So this will be a different comp filter,
I was never good at conversation.
right, with the modulation also.
I'm through it all, the conversations.
It's a bit of a different, I think there is something going on here with the
Don't
LFO.
expect any more conversation.
For some reason it's not working so well. Okay, never mind.
I'm through it all, the conversations.
Right. Another one is Rescomb 2. Now this is a commercial module, but it's actually quite a better result.
Good at conversation.
Right, maybe a bit less drive.
I'm through it all, the conversations.
Right, it's even a bit better because it has also a built-in chaos
So
LFO.
don't expect any more conversation.
Right, another time.
I'm through it all, the conversations.
Let's try this now with the phaser.
I was never good at conversation.
So this phaser again is from Surge XT.
I'm through it all, the conversations.
It's not quite there. I think the voice also of the singer, of the guy,
So don't expect any more conversation.
is quite grainy, so it adds also to this whole grainy atmosphere.
Through it all, the conversations.
Right, but I believe, let me just mute this for a second, but I believe this is more or less what's going on there. So there is random panning, random sort of looping, glitching something, and also some sort of a delay-based effect. If it's a comp filter, if it's a phaser, I'm not so sure what's going on there, but it's really grainy and it's really an interesting effect. Again, it's very subtle, but listen to the original. It's quite a nice track. Nice song, nice track, nice composition, nice song, I guess. Okay, so this was this. Again, if you download the patch, it's on Patreon, and you want to give it a try yourself, there will be everything available. Also, my beautiful singing, you can also download it from there. And that was it. So the next question is coming from Adria. Hi, Adria. I love your channel and I'm so happy that I'm finally able to support you in a more direct way. Thank you so much. I've been binge watching, is it binge or Bing? I'm not so sure. We're watching all of your videos and I saw the one where you use tables from Admirals. Unfortunately, I'm not able to use any modules from Admirals. I guess they're not available anymore, unfortunately. Yes, but I love the sequencer. Is there a good alternative you can think of? What I'm looking for is a small gate sequencer. If it could have more than one simultaneous sequence, that will be great for generative ambient patches. Thanks a lot. So thank you again. There is nothing really like it. It was quite a unique module, and I'm sorry. It's a shame that they didn't make it to V2. Really a lovely collection. But I did find something, a sequencer that might be quite fun, easy to use, and also nice for generative and ambient. So this is the octet sequencer from Count Modular. There are so many different interesting modules from this collection. Really, you should explore all of this collection. It's quite cool. So this is the octet sequencer. Basically, you either have two sequences A and B, or you can chain them. You can modulate also how many triggers or gates will be in each sequence. Right, and it has also a run input, which is also interesting for a one-shot sequence. Right, so here, for example, I'm using it to sequence two energy oscillators. It's going through a delay, or they are going through a delay. Let me take it out for a second. Right, and you can hear we have in the A sequence, we have now 5 active steps. And in the B sequence, we have 4. And with the select, I can change it. Right, so it's quite easy to create different rhythms. Right, now, unfortunately, you cannot select less than 8 steps. But we will see, I will show you in a second how you can sort of bypass that. Right, so really easy to create on the fly sequences. They have also CV input. Let's have a look here at another voice. Right, another energy going through the tap dancer from flag. And here in this case, I'm chaining the sequences. So now I have only one sequence, which is 16 steps long. But again, you can have 2 8-step sequences. And I'm randomly or generatively switching the number of triggers, right? Right, so this is also something interesting you can do. You can modulate also randomly or generatively the number of triggers. I have here 2 more FM operators, right? And in this case, if you use the reset input, for example, here I used it with another sequencer, right? You can create different lengths of sequence. If you want 7 steps, you can trigger the reset after 7 steps and so on and so forth. Right, so in this case, I'm using another octet sequencer, which is chained. So I have one sequence, and here in the second octet sequencer, which is being triggered or resetted. Right, it has 2 sequences, A and B. Right, so everything together. Something like this. Right, so again, you can modulate this generatively, you can reset things generatively, you can have 2 sequences at once or one longer sequence and create all sorts of different rhythms. It's really intuitive, really easy to use. You just switch the dial, turn the dial, not switch the dial, turn the dials, and you have a new rhythm. So the next question is from Pattern Music. Hey Omri, hi, is there a good method to clean up a trigger or gate pulse to make it conform to the trigger input requirements of other modules? I have a hardware module, the Canyon from Afterlater Audio, that puts out pulses in a pattern that I want to use as a complex rhythm. But the pulses are mostly 128 milliseconds duration square waves. So this is too wide to use as a sync for my SQ1 sequencer, which needs a 15 millisecond wide sync pulse, or it seems not to work as a trigger input to some other modules. Update? After thinking about it, I guess I could just run the pulse through an envelope with a sleep attack and adjust the other envelope parameters as needed to cause the trigger. Yes, indeed. But this is quite an interesting question because many people struggle with this. How basically to take a gate and to turn it into a trigger, and the other way around, also a trigger to gate. So yes, an envelope is a great tool for this. For example, here I have gates coming from an LFO, random running LFO, never mind, and they are going through the envelope, the ADSR. So here are the gates, and here is the results of the triggers. Right, basically you converted or disconverted, envelope converted gates into triggers. So yes, envelopes are great for this, and you have more control, right? With the decay, for example, I can have, right, if you want to use it for something else, you can also modulate this. Another thing that can be interesting is also a function generator or something like Rampage Maths. the new knock from Instruo. Right, you can use the rising output, right? You trigger it again with the, or gate it with the gates, and the rising output will output triggers according to the rise length, right? So also here you can really fine-tune the length of the gates that you want. This will work with the rise and fall as well. And this will also work, of course, with an end of cycle. If you have some sort of envelope or function generator with an end of cycle output, you can also control, or not control, but you can convert triggers, gates into triggers. And by the way, this will work also the other way around. If you trigger Rampage and you want to get a gate, then you use the rising or falling output, and you can lengthen the triggers into a gate. The next question is coming from Clement. Hi Clement, my question concerns Moog subharmonicon, which I will probably buy soon. I have read the manual about possible MIDI operations. Do you know if it's better to use Midi type A converter provided by Moog, or to use an audio card with DC coupled outputs connected to patch bay input I want, like Motu M4 or Personus 68C? Okay, so I saw there is a whole conversation there on Patreon, which is great. I don't have the subharmonicon. I do have other synths that have MIDI and CV. In my case, so there are two things. First of all, MIDI has 128 steps. In MIDI 1 at least. I don't know when MIDI 2 will come out. But it has 128 steps, which means that this is the resolution you have to work with. Right, if you want to turn a filter, for example, you have 128 possibilities of filter steps. It sounds like a lot, but sometimes it's not a lot because you can really hear the steps. Sometimes, I don't know. Which means that with CV, it's always better because CV is usually analog. And analog is a continuous signal without steps. It's endless, more or less, right? So you really have the smooth modulation stuff. On the other hand, if you want to use this for pitch and gates and stuff like this, I mean, gates maybe less, but for pitch, sending out pitch from the computer to an analog synthesizer or any other synthesizer in that matter that receives CV, it's quite, how shall I put this nicely? It's not fun because you have to calibrate this signal. You have to calibrate this pitch information before it goes out, which means that you have to send your synthesizer into the computer and then the pitch information back to the synthesizer. And if your synthesizer, if the subharmonicon, for example, is set with something with modulation or with pulse width modulation, even something simple like pulse width modulation, or some sort of a weird wave, or then you will have issues calibrating it because usually you use a sine wave for calibration because it's much easier for everyone. Anyway, I found the calibration process, sending out pitch from the computer out. I found it, I have even the ES9 from Expert Sleepers. I had the ES3 and ES6. It's not a fun process, especially if you're in the middle of things and you have effects going on and all sorts of things. Then you start unpatching stuff and patching into the computer and from the computer out, and you have to wait and do it once or twice or 3 times until it works. So if you want to send pitch, I think the easiest will be with MIDI. I think anyway, actually the easiest will be with MIDI because then you don't have to buy anything, and you don't have to buy a DC coupled interface just for sending an LFO, for example. You say, okay, I saved the money for the LFO, but you buy a new audio interface, something like this. I don't know. I think MIDI is anyway simple. It's not perfect. It's far from perfect. But if you want to integrate things, software and hardware, I think MIDI is the way to go, especially when it comes to pitch. Yes, there is latency. Yes, the latency is probably bigger with MIDI than or longer with MIDI than with CV, although I'm not so sure, to be honest. But yeah, just keep in mind, do you want to buy a new audio interface for sending LFOs out of the computer? And again, if it's for pitch, I'm telling you, it's not fun. It's not a fun process. I don't know if there is someone watching this and it's working perfectly for them and they don't have issues with this. Please let me know. I would love to know what you do. in order for this to work. But for me, it never worked, and I stopped many, I want to say years, but it's not so many years ago. I stopped sending out pitch from the computer. I use Midi if I needed, or I use hardware to sequence things. But anyway, the subharmonicon should be lots of fun. I even built it in VC VREC once. Such an interesting synthesizer. I'm sure you will love it, also without sending out modulation and stuff like this. So just, see how it goes. The next question is coming from 808 Dopamine. Hi, I was wondering if Befaco's DIY kits to build modules are worth the discount for someone who has never assembled a module. Do you need experience and special tools, or can someone just read the manual and figure it out? So I have no experience with DIY, although I always wanted to start. Always I found it really interesting just to learn what's going on there under the hood. I even signed up to one workshop from Befaco, but I had to cancel. I didn't have time eventually, but I will start once. I have to say, for me, it's not about I think it's more about the experience than the discount. I mean, the discount is pretty nice, especially if you are just starting out with modular. You can save money for more modules, of course. But I think for the experience, it's quite interesting. And yes, Befaco, I think, from what I've seen, there are also videos online of people building Befaco modules, so you can also always refer to them. I know there is Molten Modular. There is a Synth DIY guy is doing a lot of videos about Befaco stuff. There are also workshops every now and then that you can join. Maybe, I don't know if there are online workshops. So yes, the Befaco, I think they are great for starting out. As far as I understand, you don't really need any experience to build the easy modules. I mean, of course, there are different levels. Don't start with a Rampage. Start with something simple, like a slew limiter or a mixer or something like this, if it's available as DIY. The small mixer, the ST mix, or the slew limiter, or something like this, if it's available. Start with something simple, of course. You can also buy online. This also someone recommended, and maybe this I will start with this also now that I think about this. You can get all sorts of, like for children, like kits for children to learn how to solder. So you can buy them and just, have some idea of what's going on, some idea if what you use is correctly for you, if you need something else, before you start spending money on modules. I think it should be really cheap, these kits for children. And so I think this is a good way to start. And yes, Befaco, I think, and also I saw there is also, you started a thread there on Patreon, which is great. So yes, I think the Befaco DIY modules are great for beginners, but again, don't start with Rampage, start with something simple. And there is also now the new line from Erica Synth. I think there is the next question is also about this. From Erica Synth, they have a whole new line. I think now it's like 5 modules of DIY modules that are specifically meant for you to learn how modules work, which is first of all really interesting and amazing, and also how to solder. So really for beginners, I think they are really for beginners. I don't know. And I would love to have like a synthesizer that I built by myself, which can be also interesting. There's a sequencer, there's an oscillator, I believe also a wave folder, maybe even a filter. I'm not so sure. So I think it's a great way. Man, I'm jealous. I also want to start. If you do start, let me know how it goes. The next question is coming from Neil. Hi, Neil. I hope you are well. Thank you. Recently, I've been building a small eurorack with modules from Erica Synth DIY. Yes, we just spoke about this. And I've been trying to record songs with it. I get a lot of crackles and pops while I'm working with it. Do you find eurorack particularly noisy? Do you have to post-process analog recordings to clean them up? Maybe it's something I'm doing wrong. Thanks for any advice you can give. So thank you again, Neil, for your support in the question. I do get clicks. I do get pops. I do get sometimes noise. I'm just in conversation with a friend about some modules that are quite noisy for him and not for me, which is weird. But eurorack, I think, and I told him this also to him, it's a sort of a Wild West for now kind of vibe, because everyone is doing their own thing and some modules just don't like other modules. So first of all, what I think you should do is try and look, isolate the modules that might cause issues if you have a particularly loud noise. If you have an extra case, or if you can empty your case and go module by module and see what's going on, then you can isolate things. I know that for me, for example, the ES9 used to cause some noise when it was inside the system. I have it usually in a separate case by itself. So now the noise and everything is away. It also depends on the modules that are next to each other sometimes. I usually get crackles and pops from quick envelopes or from loopers and stuff like this, and samplers that are not cut in the zero crossing. So I get pops and clicks and stuff like this. If it's all the time and it's quite loud, so maybe something is wrong with the modules. You said you've been building it yourself with the DIY line from Erica Synth. Maybe something went wrong there. I guess maybe something you can test it. See again, try to isolate things and see what modules cause the issues. What I do post-process the recordings. I multi-track everything, especially for this, because sometimes I get weird noises and crackles and stuff. I use Isotop's D-Click, which works okay. I also use it for my voice. Hopefully it removes all of the different clicks and pops from my voice also. There are others, I'm sure there are others in the market. So yes, I do, when I hear stuff, I do process them. What I also always do, again, because I multi-track everything, wherever there is silence, but there is never silence, I just delete everything. So if there is no sound there, I just delete this part, just to make sure there are no weird noises coming in, nothing is eating the noise, the headroom and stuff like this. Yes, so isolate things. Again, check maybe something went wrong while you build the modules. And I'm curious to listen how this sounds like. If you can record something and upload it to Discord, for example, if you are on Discord. If not, you can email me. I'm curious to hear how it sounds like, and if maybe it's normal. If it's, it should not be normal, but if it's normal, or if it's something went wrong there. The next question is coming from Thomas. Hi, Thomas. Have you tried the no input mixer technique in VCV? Is it possible to do in software? If so, I would love to hear any ideas of how to incorporate this technique in a patch. Thank you for your work. Thank you for your support. So yes, I did try it, and no, it doesn't work as far as I know, and as far as I could experiment with it. It doesn't work in software. It doesn't work in VCV. And in my opinion, it's for the simple reason that there is no built-in noise in mixers, in software and stuff like this. In hardware, in analog mixers, there is always something going on there. There is always some noise, some crackles, some pops that if you start feeding it back, it will start creating interesting sounds. And this is the nature of analog circuitry, I guess. And in software, it doesn't work. You can feed crackles and pops and noise into your mixer, but then it's not anymore no input mixing, of course, because you do have an input. So it doesn't work. I looked also online. I tried to search for things. It doesn't work in software. Also, feedback in software is quite weird, and in analog, it works differently than in analog. So I think the best for you would be it can work with any also very affordable, I don't want to say the word cheap, but I will say it, cheap mixer. Yes, there are also cheap mixers out there that you can buy, analog mixers that you can buy, and you just send this into VCV rack and process it there, or use it for rhythms, or sample it and stuff like this can be also really interesting. But no, it doesn't work. It's not the same, and you do have to feed something into the mixer like noise or crackles or pops for getting some sort of feedback. The next question is coming from FMRH. Hi, Omri. Hi. First of all, thank you for the amazing content you keep putting out. Thank you, man. I especially enjoy when you go in depth with a specific module, as I feel sometimes a lot of modules can be daunting to get into. Man, I appreciate it. Thank you. In that vein, I'd be really curious if you have any ideas for computer scares. I love cookies. I love cookies as well. I would love to see how you would work with this module, as the text-based nature of it is a very novel idea in my opinion. One idea I had was to combine it with glass pane from past set, but I have had a hard time coming up with something special. What do you think? Thank you again for the question, man. This is such an interesting sequencer. I knew it existed, but I never took the time to really explore it. Such an interesting idea. Again, as you say, it's text-based. And for sure, I'm going to come back to this and make a whole video just about this sequencer because it's quite interesting. So first of all, what we have here, we have a few different channels, right? It will sequence basically a pitch or modulation if you want. Right, and it has knobs for each letter, A to Z or A to Z, depends where you live. Right, and each one of them is a value. You can also input external values. We will see this in a second. And you can also change the range. For now, it's 0 to 2 volts, so it's 2 octaves. And I can wiggle the knobs maybe a few times, just so we will have different values. Right, and now you can start entering text. So if, for example, I write reverb is life, right, and I unmute, this is the FM operator. Oh, I have a space. Without spacebar, reverb is life, like this. Right, we get the values. Maybe I will wiggle the knobs a bit more. Maybe one more time. Okay. Right, so each letter now, R is a value, E is a value, V is a value, and so on and so forth. And we have 12 letters, so we have 12 steps. Right, if I go just with reverb, for example, we have 5. Oh, reverb, 6. Right, and like this you can create sequences. Now there are also all sorts of different things that you can do. For example, now we have a 6-step sequence. If I want this to be, let's say, 12 steps, so it will, or let's say 10 steps, so it will play reverb and then 4 more reverb. Right, it will play reverb and then reverb. I can add at 10. Right, and now it will play reverb, which is 6, and reverb, which is 4 more, and it will have 10 steps all in all, right? So you can set the length with at. Right, and create a different sequence. You can also enter exact values. So if, for example, I want rev, and then I want to have 2 octaves up, right, and then verb. Right, for example, and then let's say 1.5. Right, so you can do something like this. Right, and then this I want to be 16 steps, so at 16. Right, this is an interesting sequence. I wish it had also gate outputs or trigger outputs. Maybe it has an expander, I have to check. I don't think so, but... Right, so this is also something you can do, for example. Another thing, you can have also randomization. So let's say, for example, we will have 3 steps. Let's say we will have sec. Right, and then I want to have another step that will be random. It will be either... And random is this, I'm not so sure how it's called, but it's this here. It will be either A or it will be, let's say, G. Right, and then you close it. Or, you know, it will be once A or once 2 volts, let's say. Right, so now this means that everything inside will be chosen at random. So either A or either 2 volts, and I can go on, I can say A, B, C. Right, so it will be either A, 2 volts, B, C, or D. It will still be 4 steps, but... Right, so like this you can, if you just want random, you can just have those 2. And then it will randomly select one. Or if you have, for example, reverb, and then you want another random letter, right? So in this here, it will select a random later. Now you can also chain sequences. Man, such an interesting thing. So if, for example, I have here, I cannot enter this. Oh, that's a shame. I cannot enter this because it will change the thing. But maybe I can copy it. Oh, let's see. So if I copy this, haha. Right, so if you have this, for example, and I have reverb, and then comma is, comma, life, right, and I close it. Right, it will chain them, I think. Or maybe reverb, let's do this, is, and then let's do another one, life, with this one. Let's see if this will work. And maybe life can be 3, no, let's say 8. Something like this. I'm not so sure what's going on here now. But you can see it's quite interesting. I have to explore this more. Such an interesting way to sequence things. Right, so basically you enter letters. The letters are a sequence. You can enter all sorts of different, how to call it, manipulators, I guess. I don't know, like at and the arrows and stuff like this. Right, and create all sorts of different rhythms. So here, and you mentioned also glass pane or other sequencers. So here I have a few ideas for you. Here I have again a sequence going, right? You can see the different things, glass, comma, pane times 10, and then it will randomize between 1.5 and 2 volts. Right, and this will sequence the first energy that I have here, which will be this one. Right, and the end of cycle here is opening an envelope for the delay. Right, so this is the first sequence, and then I have here another sequence, which is another energy through some chorus, which is a bass. Right, you have also, by the way, individual gate inputs. In this case, there is reverb, and then is life, it will always choose a different note, right, because it's inside the randomization thingy. Right, so this is another sequence, and I have the end of cycle driving glass pane. Right, with another voice, so you can use the end of cycle to drive glass pane, for example. Okay, solo this. Right? So this is something you can do. And again, I mentioned that there are inputs for the knob, so you can inject external voltage to some of the notes. Now this will be an uppercase note. I have to take the volume a bit down. I'm starting to shout here. Right, so this will be an uppercase note. So in this case, it's the input Z, and you can see it here. I have random Z. So sometimes it will have R, N, or D, and sometimes it will take the external input from Z because it's an uppercase Z or Z uppercase letter. And this will happen in the length of 16 steps, right? And the external input is coming from another glass pane, which is running with a different clock multiplication. So sometimes it will play according to the I love cookies, sometimes glass pane will be injected, and another voice here is 2 more energies. I will solo this. Right? Right, so again, sometimes it will play R, sometimes N, sometimes D, and sometimes the external input from Z, which is glass pane. Right? Also, this patch will be, of course, available on Patreon. But again, really, thank you for this question. It's such a lovely sequencer. I'm happy that I want to say discovered it or had a chance to try it. At least, yes, indeed. Very cool, thank you. So the next question is coming from Bjorn. Hi, could you please give some advice for vocoding voice? For example, if doing modular, which carrier signals gives most promising results? Which vocoder to use? Okay, so in VCVRack, I will show you also some examples of modules in hardware, but in VCVRack there are not so many vocoders, but there are two that are quite nice. So there is the free vocoder from Surge XT, a new vocoder. It's still in beta, but I'm sure it will be released soon to the library. Quite an interesting vocoder. And there is also Spectra, which is commercial from VCV, but it's an amazing module anyway. It's a filter bank that can also do vocoding, basically vocoding. If you want to do vocoding, DIY sort of, you will need two filter banks or a filter bank that can do also vocoding. Which is this one here, Spectra, for example. It has all sorts of different other interesting features that you can use. So again, I don't know what's with this month's Q&A, but I have again my voice recorded. This is just a sample of me talking, just so we have something to use with the vocoder, nothing special. Right, so this is again just my voice, just so we have something to use with the vocoder, just like it said. Now this is going here to the input. I'm not so sure if this is a mistake, or maybe I'm mistaking, but it says that this is the carrier signal. It should be the modulator, the voice should be the modulator and not the carrier, and the carrier should be the, in this case it's a synth sound, but never mind, it's going to the carrier in this case. And the sound I'm using, and also that I suggest to use, is something rich in harmonic content. If you use sine waves, you will not get the best results. In vocoders, usually they also add even noise to get even more clear voice. So I say use a voice or a sound or a synth that has that is rich in harmonic content. So here, for example, I'm using two oscillators, one saw, one square. I'm mixing them with noise, right? So it's really rich in harmonics. It's a very bright sound, and it's even going through a chorus just for fun. Right, let's listen just to this actually for a second. So this will be, maybe I can take it from here. This will be the synth sound. Again, available on Patreon if you want to download it. It's nothing special, but still. And I play it polyphonically with the keyboard that I have here. Very rich, very bright. Right, and this will be the carrier. Again, in this case, I'm not so sure if it's a mistake or not, but this is how it is. Let's remove this. Right, so this is how it will sound like, basically. It's a bit loud. Maybe I can take it down a bit. It's polyphonic also. This is just a sample of me talking, just so we have something to use with the vocoder, nothing special. Let's see how it sounds like. This is just a sample of me talking, just so we have something to use with the vocoder, nothing special. Maybe I can shorten this a bit. Right. Something to use with the vocoder, nothing special. This is just a sample of me talking, just so we have something to use with the vocoder, nothing special. This is just a sample of me talking, just so we have something to use with the vocoder, nothing special. This is just a sample of me talking. Right, and you have all sorts of different features. It's really nice. I'm a bit never mind. This is the vocoder from Surge XT. Let's listen to this now with so again, this will be the carrier with the with Spectra. And here you have to enable the spectrum transfer. sounds quite different. And here you can change the decay.
This is just a sample of me talking. Just so there's something to use with the cooler especially. This is just a sample of me talking.
I like this a bit better, I have to say.
This is just a sample of me talking. Just so there's something to use with the cooler especially. This is just a sample of me talking.
Right, and you can change the individual level of the different bands, I believe. Right, the level, the decay for the individual ones. It has also level inputs, band inserts, envelope outputs, band outputs. You can process things individually. And again, it can do also vocoding. This is a commercial module from VCV, but I think it's really worth it. Even if you don't want vocoding, if you just want a filter bank, can be quite interesting. There's also the filter bank from Bog Audio, but again, you will need two at least to make it work, and it's a bit cumbersome. You have to connect things and everything, but it can work also with it. And in hardware, there are also some options. So first of all, there's this thing. I'm sure it will work the same also with the bigger one. And with the newer this thing, it has also a vocoder. Of course, it has less control, but still, if you want vocoding, this can work. There is Warps, which is unfortunately discontinued, everything for mutable instruments, but I'm sure there are clones out there that you can use. It has also vocoding with internal oscillators, also can also be interesting. There is also the Bark filter processor from Verbos. This is a filter bank, and it has built-in vocoding, so you can modulate the even or the odd bands with the even or the odd bands. So you have one signal will go to the odds, the other signal will go to the evens, and then you can cross-modulate them with the envelope followers. So basically, the envelope followers of the modulator will open the envelopes or the levels of the carrier, and like this, you will get the vocoding. Is there another one? Yes, there is also Fumana from, I forgot from which one is this? Never mind. But there is also Fumana, which is also a filter bank, and this also has vocoding. I believe this here is a bit more traditional vocoding, so it's not just the odds and evens, it will be everything. I'm not so sure. But yes, there are also vocoders in hardware if you are interested. And again, the signal you should use, or you can use, of course, experiment with all sorts of different things. But I think for vocoding a voice, the brighter, the better. Of course, you can vocode other things like drums. Vocoding drums is also really interesting. But using rich sounds, rich in harmonics, bright sounds will give you really interesting results. And again, add some noise in there just for the extra clarity. The next question is from Walmik. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, or Walmik maybe. Could you please share your approach on the structure of your compositions in hardware modular? For example, people composing in a more traditional sense seem to think in terms of intro, outro, verse, ABA parts, or exposition and deposition, and some other fancy terms. I'd really like to know how you approach structure when you are composing. I've noticed you always tend to round up a track, even if it's a tutorial for a technique, hence curious to apply any pointers you have for the structures of your compositions. It is a bit different than the walkthrough videos because there you have already applied the structure. I'm more interested in the thought process you follow for envisioning your tracks. Typically, students will study a piece from Bach and then reverse engineer it to learn it and see what Bach was thinking. In my case, I'm directly asking Bach. Okay, this is a big one. This is a big question, but thank you for it. Lovely question. So there are a few things, a few ways I compose with modular. First of all, there are the generative pieces, which I think there is nothing, the generative pieces are running by themselves. There is also a mindset in this, but it's quite different from the compositions. And there are other two types, I guess, of compositions that I create. So the first one is something where I sit down with an idea and with a sort of something that I would like to build upon. And I will speak about this in a second. And there is another approach where I sit down and I let the modules guide me and basically compose more. I don't know, compose more live, let's call it. Composing while performing. which is not a technique, it's an approach I really enjoy. And this is part of the thing what I love in modular, which everything is live. I compose live, I perform live. It's all about the performance. I love the performance aspect of the compositions. It's not me hitting play and it's there. It's not me editing a snare for 2 days. No, I'm there in the music, in the sound, on the axis of time. Music lives on the axis of time. Everything is live, everything is moving, and I'm there live composing with it. So this is the approach that sometimes I also take. Again, I don't have some sort of an idea. I have an idea what I want to explore maybe, but then I let the sounds and modules carry me away. And I just see what happens. In terms of structure with this approach, it's very much less structure. I mean, there is a beginning because there has to be a beginning. There is an end because there has to be an end. Because, I mean, this is how nature of things work, I guess. But there is no real structure in them where I say, okay, so this will be the verse now, and then I will play next time. I will go back to it and play it again. It doesn't work like this. It flows. It's more linear, I guess. This is also why I enjoy working with modular, unlike working in a DAW. DAW, everything is stacked. It's more vertical. I say in modular, but it's just this approach. Of course, you can do this also in a DAW, but think more linearly, more horizontal, because at the end, it's a sort of a journey. And sometimes you get a deja vu, you see things, you hear things that were there already. I love this. And this I also do in the second approach, which I will speak about in a second. But always have, for me, I don't know, to me it's important always to have something familiar there. So when I sit down and I start composing, I try to make sure that things are, I love things that repeat themselves. So they're a bit more repetitive. If I have like a line going, maybe I will have another synthesizer or another voice that has this line, which will come later, or this line inverted or mirrored or stuff like this. Right, just to have something again familiar. The music is all about this how is it called? This fine line between chaos and repetitiveness, or timbres, or contrast. Again, contrast, so sometimes you have something that is totally random, but you have something to back it up with something more stable. So anyway, this is another approach that I'm taking, right? I'm sitting in the modular and I'm not thinking too much. I'm just going and I let the modular take me. There is no structure. It's more, if you want to compare it to classical music, it's more like a fantasy. Right? There is no A, B, B, whatever. It's more like a fantasy. It just flows. It's more linear. It's less repetitive maybe. And it just takes you on a journey. And it starts, it ends, and everything in between is like a journey, basically. And then there's another approach where I also do from time to time, where it's a bit more structured. So it starts usually at the piano. For example, Stop Lying About Love, which I did recently. Another one, I cannot think of it. Oxen, for example, which I did recently. They started at the piano. So I said we have an electric piano at home that we bought for our son, which he loves, which I'm quite proud of him for this. I'm happy for him, actually. I'm happy for myself also that he's playing piano. Never mind, we have a piano at home, and it's funny because you can record 2 tracks there. So I usually record like 2 lines and I experiment with them. So I sit at the piano and I try to write a melody, a chord progression, or something that I have in my head. And this is the idea that I will go and I will take it to the modular. Again, Stop Lying About Love is a great example. Oxen is a great example. I have now another one that will, maybe by the time you are watching this, it's out already, I'm not so sure. That also started at the piano. And I just went with it to the modular. So this is a bit more structured. I have like an idea, I have notes, I have a chord progression, and I go to the modular. But then again, as soon as I have this ready, I go again to the other approach, which is letting the modules, which is letting the sounds carry me. And I don't think about chorus, verse. It's not really, it has no place there at all. Not that I'm judging anything or anyone or whatever or any music. I listen to all sorts of different types of music that have also chorus and verse and stuff like this. It has nothing to do with me judging it. It's just that it's not connected. I cannot even think about writing a modular piece that has an opening, that has an intro, that has a chorus, that has a repetitive chorus, of course, that has a verse and have stuff like this. To me, it will just not work because it's just not the way that I think about composing music with the modular, with the hardware. So I don't think about A, B, A. I don't think about chorus, verse, and so on. I do think about intro and outro. To me, it's all about the performance. I mean, the music that I record, usually I will perform 80, 90, 95% of it live. The performance is the composition. I compose while I perform. So everything is happening live more or less. And with modular, you will need quite a heavy sequencer. I don't know how to. I don't even know how to do this. How to have a verse and chorus and stuff like this with modular. I don't think it's the place also for modular. If this is what you're looking for, I think a DAW will be much easier for you. But I think more of a linear type of mindset. Thinking linearly, thinking like a journey, thinking like a story. To me, this is what works. There is a great performer with modular. It's called Itai. And he's performing songs. I mean, he's singing also. It's such an amazing music, and he's working also with modular. And he has songs. He has intro, verse, chorus, and stuff like this with lyrics and everything. And he's doing it with the modular, and he's also performing it live, and it's amazing. Right, so this is also possible, but to me, it's just I don't even know how to approach something like this. I don't really want also to do something like this because I feel like the fun of modular, to me, the fun of composing live, to me, is that everything is happening on the axis of time. It's a journey, it's a story, it's a dream, it's a movie, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I didn't even answer the question actually. And that's maybe because I don't really have a way of, I don't know, maybe I don't have an approach for this. Maybe it's just something that happens by itself. I'm not so sure. I have to think about it longer, and I will maybe post a video about this. This is a good idea for a video. So yeah, I'm going to think about this. I'm sorry, I just wasted like 20 minutes of your time. I'm going to think about this a bit more, and I will come back to you and I will do something about this because this is quite interesting. All right. Cheers. So the next question is coming from Marcus. Hi Marcus, is there any VCV step sequencer or any other way in VCV where you can mix fixed notes and randomized notes, and the randomized notes are in the same scale as the fixed notes? There is a new VST that can do this, Tepic VST. All the best, Marcus. Okay, so the answer is already in the question. Mix fixed notes and randomized notes, and the randomized notes are in the same scale. So the answer is already there. This is a technique that you can do with any sequencer basically, and add randomized notes on certain steps and have a fixed sequence, and then every now and then have a random note. Right, so here I have a sequence coming from the Sec3. It's sequencing a sine wave. Right, and I'm using a quantizer because I want to stay in a certain scale. And now I can mix this sequence, this fixed sequence, with random voltage. Right, and there are a few ways you can do this. This technique allows you basically to do this per step. So each step, you can choose the steps, which steps will have random notes. and all the other ones will not. So first of all, I'm going to use the VCA mixer. In VCV, it's quite easy because almost any mixer in VCV will work also for pitch. In hardware, it's a bit different. You will have to find a mixer that is DC coupled and that will not filter out pitch information. There are quite a few actually, but still you have to keep this in mind. Right, so I'm going to send the sequence first to the mixer. I'm not going to change any of its levels, although this can also be interesting. Right, so we have the same result. And now I have here sample and hold or random voltage that I want to use for note information. So first of all, I'm going to sync it with the sequence, right? I'm going to use the clock of the sequencer to trigger it, right? And this will go to another channel of the mixer, right? So now if I start bringing it in, right now we have always random, but I can use an envelope to bring the level of these random notes in and out. So here I have an envelope, so I'm going to connect to the CV input. And I'm going to use the gates from the sequencer, which is only 2 steps. So only on those 2 steps we will get a random note, right? And you even get a bit of a swing. Right, this will depend on the envelope, basically. Right, if I trigger it from here, you get less chance of change in notes. Right, and everything will stay in the scale because you're using a quantizer after the mixer, so everything will stay in the same scale. So this is the first thing you can do, and you can experiment with this. You can use an envelope, you can use a gate, you can use all sorts of things to bring this in. You can use different levels, right? I can say, okay, just 1 step. Right? And you can experiment in all sorts of different ways. You can change the envelope and get sorts of glissando. Right, something like this. So this is the main idea here. You take your sequence. I mean, this is modular. I guess that in Ableton or something like this, maybe you can, I'm not so sure. I think that in Bitwig you can for sure do this because Bitwig is very modular, but this is the modular environment. So you can take a sequence, you can mix it with random notes, and you can say, okay, I want this random note only on this and this step, and send this to a quantizer, and everything will stay in the same scale. Now in VCV there is another module, or there is a module that can do this basically for you. It's called Fate from the Geodesics. It's an event modifier, so you can use it. I have here the same sequence. So you can use it to not inject, but sort of add randomness to any CV, but in this case it will be pitch. Right, so the pitch will go to the events input, right, and then from the output this will go back to the quantizer because again we want to stay in scale. And then you have to trigger Fate so it will know when to add this random voltage. So in this case I'm going to use again the trigger output from the sequencer. So it will happen on those 2 steps and it will add randomness on various steps. And now with the wheel knob you will change the probability, right, the chance that this will happen. So let's say I will go around somewhere here. And with the choice depth, this is basically the modulation depth or the randomness depth, you can change by how much. So again, the wheel, the probability, and the choice depth by how much. Right? Let's take the probability down. Right? So you have your sequence, and then you have some randomness added to it with the fate from geodesics. And there are other sequencers, there are dedicated sequencers that have this built in. One of them is Entropia, which is such an amazing sequencer. I wish it was available in hardware, maybe one day. So Entropia, also geodesics. Right here I have a sequence going again, just sequencing a sine wave with a nice reverb. Right, and now you can see there are two circles. So there is the inner circle, which will be in this case the fixed sequence, and there is the outer circle that again in this case will be random notes, and for each of them you can set the probability, right? The probability of the random notes. So how you do this, basically you change here the yellow sequence. This can be also the blue sequence, but the yellow sequence will be random. Right, and then you change the depth. So let's say I want step 3 to have a bit of randomness, and you can change the probability. So if I change this to 100%, this step will always be random. Right, with this amount, with this depth, I can take it even higher. Right, and you can change the probability to be just 50%, let's say. So sometimes it will be random, sometimes not, and you can add this to each and every step of the sequence, which is amazing. It's just an 8-step sequencer, but it has so much movement built in already. Right? So this is an amazing sequencer if you want to experiment with this. There are other sequencers. There is I Love Cookies that we looked at before, right, where you can add this random brackets, I guess. Have a look at the segment on I Love Cookies from before. There is a Bordel from Bido. I have also a full video about it, I believe. Each and every step has also a probability for pitch, also for other things, but also for pitch. So you can per step, you can change the probability of it changing randomly, and it will all stay inside the scale because you have a built-in quantizer here that you can change the scale, and it will all stay inside of this scale. The same with Max Slicer. Also, Max Slicer, I have a video all about it. It has individual inputs for each of the steps. It's basically a switch, but let's call it a sequencer in this case, where you can inject random voltage, and you can say, okay, I just want random voltage on step 7, and with the slider you can change by how much. And with Squonk, there is also a full video about Squonk from Nischi. Also here from the over A, you can inject per step random voltage that will come out of A. So if you use row A for pitch, right, if you change the values of row A and you send this to a quantizer for pitch information, you can inject random voltages on different steps and they will come out together mixed or overriding the A output, right? So there are many options in this VRAC, also in hardware. I think Entropia is really fun. Also the other sequencers are really fun, but I guess experimenting with this technique can yield really interesting results. You can find all sorts of different unexpected pitch changes, glissando, and all sorts of different things that you can experiment with. Okay, the next question is from Robert. Hi Robert, I hope you are well. What would be the best way to approximate a flute type lead as far as gates, feel, and notes are concerned? Are there any modules that will help it make sense over a chord progression, for example? Additionally, is there a way to ensure... Okay, let's start with the first question. There are two questions here. Let's start with the flute question. Right, so I have here a very basic flute sound. Of course, you can take this in all sorts of different ways, but it's very basic. I can play it with the keyboard. Just a second. Right, it's a very basic sound. I have a sine wave going to a mixer. Right, this should be... Okay, this should be green. And the square wave also going to a mixer really low, and I have two envelopes, one controlling the overall mix and one controlling the mix of the square wave and noise. So I'm also mixing pink noise. Right, so these are the two envelopes. They are set a bit differently. And I have also noise and an LFO as a sort of vibrato and noise to create this instability in pitch. So this is going to the FM input. Right, so again, one oscillator, noise, modulating pitch with vibrato with an LFO being mixed with two different envelopes. A very basic sound, but it sounds quite nice, especially with this vibrato and a nice amount of reverb. Right, so this is the basic sound, and now here I have a chord progression, a very simple chord progression with the note sequencer from JW sequencing polyphonically the FM operator. Right. Four steps, so four chords. And now I want this flute to play on top of these chords that it will make sense. So something you can try is using an arpeggiator. Now an arpeggiator basically will take chords and will play the notes one after the other in various ways. In VCV there are many options, or a few options for arpeggiating sound. Any DAW has an arpeggiator. I'm not so sure in hardware if there is one. I'm pretty sure there is one. But there is no polyphony in hardware, so it will work a bit differently. But anyway, in this case, we are using, I'm using the ARP from Hampton Harmonics. It's a really nice arpeggiator, and the clock I'm using is more or less a generative, a random clock. So I'm taking an LFO, and I'm clocking the random module with the LFO, and the random module is modulating the rate of the LFO, so there is a modulation feedback loop. The LFO is clocking the random is modulating the LFO, and so forth, and so forth, and so on, and so forth. So there is a sort of a generative clock, so the gates themselves are not on the clock. It sounds a bit more organic, it will change every now and then. And also the ARP is set to random, right? So it will take the notes from the chords and it will play them randomly. So the flute sound will play the notes that the chords are playing, but it will choose different notes each and every time, right? So it will play something that is related to the chords, but it will choose a different note from the chord and will play it also in different timings because of the generative LFO, right? So I have here the same voice. What I also did here is I added even more randomness or generativeness, if you will, with the sample and hold for the envelopes, right? For the attack and release in this case, and the attack and decay for the second envelope, right? Just to add some movement to the articulation. So it will play different timings, it will play different notes, but that are connected to the chords, and the articulation, the attack and the decay will change. Sometimes it will be quick, sometimes it will be slower, and so on. And all of this is going to a delay just to fill in the gaps, more or less. So this is how it will sound like. And you can influence the timing a bit with the LFO, right? If you bring this LFO to be quicker. Or slower. Right, and maybe add even more delay. Right, maybe increase the noise a bit. by the way, the chords can also come from a keyboard, right? You don't have to use a chord module. You can play the chords on a keyboard, and the harp will still arpeggiate these chords, and then you can just improvise, and the flute will play with you, basically. Will play the notes in different timings with a sort of a solo, if you will. So the second part of the question was, additionally, is there a way to ensure that a note is not played twice in a row through a sample and hold? Okay, so this is what I have here. I have sample and hold, sequencing an FM operator. Right, and you can hear quite clearly that there are many notes that repeat themselves. Right, and we don't want this to happen. So first of all, you can use a quantizer that has a gate output, for example, quantum. Right, so if I use now, let's do this here, if I use quantum as the quantizer and I use the gates from quantum, we will get a gate only when there is a change in note. Right, so no two notes will play one after the other. Right, this will work also in hardware with quantizers that have a gate output. Usually they will output a gate whenever there is a change in note. Right, but you can also do this yourself with something that's called a slope detector. Basically, it will detect if the signal goes up, if the signal goes down, or if the signal is steady, right? If the pitch goes up, if the pitch goes down, or if the pitch doesn't change. If you want only gates when the pitch changes, right, you can either use the rising, so only when the pitch goes up, either just the falling when it goes down, or always when it's moving and not when it's steady. So I'm going to use the moving output and I'm going to send the pitch as well to the slope detector. And let's get for here. Right, so again, now only when the pitch changes, we get a gate. Right, this is a slope detector from Count Modular. Right, so this is basically how we can avoid having two notes play, or the same note playing over and over again. The next question is from Adi. Hi Adi, before everything else, thank you so much for the content you create. Thank you so much for your support. My question has been discussed many times, yet I find the particulars still unclear. Tuning, specifically how to tune more elaborate sound sources and not one that can output a simple square wave. Take rings, for example, or elements. My solution was to record into Ableton and use Melodyne, but I really want to be able to tune without a PC. I don't really have good news for you, although I did manage to tune rings in VCV, but one of the main reasons why I don't get a rings in hardware as much as I like its sound is because it's so hard to tune, and when you change the sound, the tuning changes, and so on and so forth. But this is the nature of inharmonic sound sources, I guess. By nature, they will be inharmonic. They will not be harmonious. You cannot really control them so much, especially when you start changing the sound. In this case, I did get it to tune. The frequency is somewhere -23 or something like this. But in VCV, it's so easy because you have really fine tuning. In hardware, it's much, much harder. But there are people who are doing this. There is lots of music with rings that is tuned. I think taking the structure down really helps just to tune it, and staying on the normal modes here, so nothing inharmonic or something like this. And then right, so then it will stay in tune, but if I change, for example, some things here, it's still in tune, but now not anymore, because now it's inharmonic. right? It's more similar to noise, basically. Right, so with rings, and I guess also with elements, the structure will very much influence the tuning. So make sure to take it all the way down and then see where it works for you. Let's change this to an FM voice, I don't know. Right, but this is the structure. Right, if you take the structure down or if you have it on an interval, it should be okay. Right, so the structure on rings really influences everything, and the frequency, you will need to use a tuner and tune it. There is another way you can sort of bypass stuff like this. Like if you have a really interesting sound with FM, right, like I have here. Right, and it sounds not so nice, and you want, I mean, this will change the sound, but you want more or less to be able to control it. You can sync the oscillators to a third oscillator and then change the pitch of the third oscillator. Right, so if I use another oscillator here to sync both oscillators, right, you can very much have this. Right, you still have an interesting sound, but it's in tune more or less, and you can even change the sound even more. Right, it is noisy, but it's still, there is some there are some notes there, and the syncing oscillator is not going anywhere to the output. You're not listening to it at all. It will just control the frequency. Oh yeah. Yeah, so a tuner, if you are speaking about rings or elements, take the structure all the way down. This should help, and go with the easy modes. Don't choose the inharmonic mode, for example, because this by default will be inharmonic and hard to tune. And if you are doing this with oscillators, cross-modulating each other and so on, you have another oscillator, use it for syncing. Again, this will change the sound because it will get this sync sound, but still it will make tuning much easier. The next question is coming from Simon. Hi Simon, I'm unsuccessfully trying to recreate the Juno Hoover sound as exemplified by Human Resources Dominator. Any tips? So yes, first of all, unison, oscillator, unison, having lots of waves playing together, a bit detuned, will very much already take you there. So here I'm using the Surge XT. Again, it's in beta. It will be released soon. You can already download it if you want. And all of the oscillators, or many of the oscillators, and especially the classic VCO, sound amazing. And they have unison, which means that if I take the unison down, for example, on both of them, this will be one oscillator. I'm just bringing the level on the mixer. Right, this is the shape of it. You can change it. I found this works nicely. Let's take the detune down for a second. Right, and now I'm starting to add unison, lots of unison. I went with 8 voices. And the detuning is also quite important. Already you get this fat sound. Right, and then you add another oscillator an octave above. And again with lots of unison. And some noise here on this mixer from Surge, there is built-in noise. Right, so already maybe an octave down, just a second. Right, it sounds huge thanks to the unison. Now you go and you add even more hugeness with the chorus. right? Something like this. And now the real magic happens with an envelope for the pitch. So the pitch will go up and then down, right? And this is the real magic of this sound, right? So I have here an envelope going first through a VCA because I wanted to be able to control the depth a bit easier, right? So if I bring it in, and this is going, of course, with the pitch. Right, and you can change by the attack. Right, and this is basically it. So lots of oscillators detuned, some chorus. You can add also, of course, a bit distortion, compression, and so on and so forth. And then an envelope for the pitch. Right, and then if you add, I have here the kick, snare, and hi-hat. Right? Right, and you can do all sorts of things with it. One of the things you can try is also to sample it, and then sample just one note, and then with the sample, transpose it and stuff like this, and create a sequence. This will give you a more classic sound, I guess, because I think this sound was mostly sampled and was not played like this. Yeah, but this is more or less it. Lots of oscillators, chorus, and an envelope for the pitch. So the last question is coming from Gerald. Hi Gerald, I would like to say your output and the way you make it all available to us is nothing short of amazing. Thank you so much, especially in this day and age when I started to become convinced that everything was about money and not music. I really appreciate it, Gerald. Thank you. The question I would like to ask is, how do I prioritize to work towards what I want to achieve, which is regenerative type patches, drum, percussion programming, and chord construction, basically setups that will enable me to play live as you demonstrated with the Dangerine patch, as it would be fantastic to improvise a whole track or even an album. I realize I still have a lot to learn, but how do I learn it, as there is so much I feel I need to know and it needs to flow creatively and not through a tutorial, as wonderful as they are. I know that's not the purpose of them, but I need to get in the zone. Not an easy question to answer, Omri, but I'm sure a question many of us feel when we get overwhelmed by the sheer wealth of wonders that awaits us. Thanks again for everything, Gerald. Thank you for your support, Gerald. Really appreciate it. This reminds me, I studied or learned or practiced or took drum lessons when I was a teenager. I started I was a drummer. I started out as a drummer, and I took drum lessons with 16 when I was 16 or something like this. And my father used to take me there. It was it was not far, but it was in a different city or different town. And he used to take me there every week. And every week he asked me the same question. Don't you know already how to play the drums? How many more lessons do you need? It was a joke, of course, but still he asked me this every week. Don't you know already how to play the drums? Why you need so many lessons? It's never ending, Gerald. It's never ending. You will always learn something. I'm in this 4 or 5 years already, and I'm still learning, and good so, because this is the whole fun of experimenting and learning and discovering all sorts of different things. So I don't think you will ever reach the point where you say, okay, now I know this and I'm comfortable and that's it. I don't need anymore. It will never come. Don't wait for it. The best tip I can give you is enjoy the way. Don't think about how much you still have. Think about the way where you are now and what you are doing now and trying to enjoy it. There's a story called Momo that I read it, and I would love to read it for my kids also once. And there is a guy there who is sweeping the streets, and he always says, I always never looking up the street to see how much street he still has. He always looks down to what he's doing now, to the next sweep, and is concentrating on it, because if he will look up the street and he will see how much he still has, then he will just break and he will not continue, because it's just overwhelming. Don't think about everything you don't know. Think about what you do, and think about where you are now, and try to enjoy it. Don't overwhelm yourself with everything. If you want to prioritize something, this means you want to concentrate on it, and you have to sit down and you have to do the work. No video will help you. You said it yourself already. Never mind how many videos you watch. You will have to sit down and do the work and enjoy it. Also try to enjoy it as much as you can. If you want drum and percussion programming, the sit down, don't I think this is a mistake that I do all the time. I always try to create tracks. I always try to create music. And I know many people also, they have the pressure, okay, now I have to make this piece of music full and whole. And if not, I'm just not going to do it. And then they don't start even. Don't think about this. Think about, concentrate on small steps, on small stuff. If you want drum percussion programming, sit down, take a sequencer. I mean, you are using VCVREC, I know. Take a sequencer, take one drum voice, two drum voices, and see if you like the process. If not, try to and look for a different sequencer. If you don't like the drum sounds, try maybe to work on them or use a different module, and try to get as much as you can out from a simple, small setup. This is why I think fixed racks are amazing, because they are limiting yourself, and limitation, especially in VCVREC, is important because you have more than 2,000 modules available. This is overwhelming, especially if you are just beginning and you don't know where to start. Don't even think about this. Don't think about what you don't have. Don't think about what you don't know. Concentrate on small steps, on one sweep after the other, right? Sit down with the sequencer and with the drum voice and see what you like. You like it? Continue, add another drum voice. You want melody and you like what you already have? Continue and take another sequencer and try to create a melody. You want to create regenerative type of patches, then concentrate, take a week or a day or an hour and concentrate just on trying to create something regenerative. Because later on, when you go and you want to create a track or a full patch or a composition, then you have the tools that will help you. Again, it's never ending. You will always learn something. And that's the good thing also about this. Because if it was easy, it wouldn't be fun. And I hope you agree with me. Yes, so something that can help you also to get in the zone again is concentrating on small steps. Have small victories, small successes, right? That you can say, okay, now this hour I spent and I learned something and it's great, instead of spending a whole week on something and just being frustrated because you are overwhelmed and you're always starting something new. Don't do that. Just concentrate one step, one sweep after the other. And this will help you. And don't think about building whole patches or building whole sound, all compositions, whole tracks. Try to concentrate on small things and then slowly build yourself a setup that you are comfortable with. If you like the Tangerine patch, the Tangerine Dream fixed track, or you like this patch, just work with it. Don't try other stuff. If you like it, work with it and see what you can get from it and concentrate on different aspects of it. Maybe concentrate on the bass. See, okay, how many variations can I get from this bass? Work on the noise. I don't know, how many variations can I get out of the noise? What can I do with the effects, with the rhythms and stuff like this? Always concentrate on small steps and don't overwhelm yourself with the sheer wealth of wonders that awaits us, because it's never ending. You will never have enough. I'm telling you this, you will never have enough. And this is true to everything in life, not just with modular. But don't look what you don't have. Don't look what you still need to learn. Concentrate on the next sweep or the sweep you are in, or the step you are in, or the sound you are creating, and try to enjoy it. The whole thing of it is having fun. If you overwhelm yourself, it's not fun. I'm already telling you this is not easy. Also not after 4 and 5 years. It's not easy for me as well, but this is the whole fun. This is what drives me, right? If it was easy, it wouldn't be fun. It's like, I remember I used to play Red Alert. It's a PC game back then, Red Alert a lot. And it was really hard and it was cool. And as soon back then there were like cheat codes or cheat files that you can download. And then all of a sudden you have all of the money, you have right upgrades. It's like 5 seconds and you upgrade everything. And it was not fun. And after an hour you stop playing because it's not fun anymore. So this is the same also with music and modular. If it was fun, it wouldn't, if it was fun, if it was easy, it wouldn't be fun, right? So, just concentrate on small steps. Don't overwhelm yourself and concentrate on different aspects. Build yourself or use the Tangerine patch and concentrate on it. There is no easy way. You can watch as many videos as you want. And I'm sort of contradicting myself because I am making videos, but my videos, I guess, I don't know, this is what I would like to think are more for inspiration. I mean, I'm not showing you exactly what to do, but I'm more or less giving you ideas that you can try for yourself. So take an idea and try it and concentrate on it and don't jump from one idea to another and so on and so forth. And I hope this was helpful. Okay, and that was it. Thank you again, Patreons, so much for your support. Thank you again so much for the questions. If you are a Patreon, come join us on Discord. We have monthly challenges with giveaways and a lovely, lovely community. Thanks again to PathSet for donating his collections for the monthly giveaway, for the monthly challenges. If you're not a Patreon, come join us on Patreon. Again, we have an amazing community there. There's so much extra content, videos, presets, patches, all sorts of different things. So come join us on Patreon. Also come join us on Discord. Cheers.